All right, hello and welcome everyone to Phoenixville Library's Zoom channel and our community room here at the library for our presentation tonight with author Joe Lex, who is a volunteer tour guide at Philadelphia's Laurel Hill Cemetery and has written a book called All Bones Considered, in which he profiles 52 women buried at Laurel Hill. And he'll be talking about his book and some of those women tonight. Thank you, Joe, for being with us. Oh, and those of you who have any questions, comments during the talk in the room or on Zoom, feel free to jump in at any time. You can unmute if you're on Zoom. If you prefer to type it into the chat, you can do that, and I'll relay your question. All right, with that, Joe, take it away.
Absolutely. All right. Hey, good evening. I am Joe Lex. I am returning to Phoenixville. Believe it or not, and I think I've got the dates right on this, from April of 1967 through April of 1968, I was in 91 Charlie Clinical Specialist School at Valley Forge General Hospital. And I was actually in Phoenixville back in the late 60s before I went to Vietnam. That was my last stop before I went to Nam. So I knew the community a little bit way back then, but that was a long, long time ago. And I haven't really made it out. I think I made it up to the coffee house once or twice. Anyway, I am Joe Lex. I'm a retired professor of emergency medicine from Temple University. That's what all the letters are. They're MD, FACET, Fellow of the American College of Emergency Physicians, Master of the American Academy of Emergency Medicine, and Fellow of the International Federation of Emergency Medicine. Now, can we make this work? There we go.
The clicker's there for you too.
This is our theme. Yeah, but I need the mouse because of some of the links that are in here.
Okay.
This is our theme for the night. Nobody is finally dead until the ripples they cause in the world die away. That will be our theme. This is the book, All Bones Considered. It is based on the scripts from the podcast that I do. After I started as a guide at Laurel Hill, I started researching. And I found some really interesting people. And I said, I want to do a podcast. So I started to do the podcast. Podcast's been going for more than 6 years now. In fact, I just published the most recent one about minstrels and mummery a couple of days ago. And podcast has been downloaded more than 80,000 times. It was voted the top history podcast in top Philadelphia history podcast. And all of a sudden, I found myself with about 500 scripts. I said, okay, what do I do with these? Book. The women had to be first, though, because when I decided 52, I put 52 men, 52 women in piles. When I looked at them, no comparison. The women were far more interesting than the men because they had to be. Because they had to be. Women were not even allowed to write their own history until, what, the 19th century? Anything you read about women before the mid-19th century was probably written by a man. Probably, not all, but probably.
Women have better details.
Women have far better details. Women have so much more to overcome that it's just such a more interesting story. So this is what we're going to talk about. This is Laurel Hill East. Back when it was looking pretty spiffy, and it's starting to look that way again right now. We just had a big $500,000 rehab. There's no longer a door going in from the front here, but the rest of that has been rehabbed. And if you haven't been there this year, it's really, really sharp looking. That is Laurel Hill East. That's on Ridge Avenue in Philadelphia. 79 acres, opened in 1836. Laurel Hill West is on Belmont Avenue in Ballackinwood, also on the Schuylkill River, upstream on the other side. Different county, different township, different city, but same ownership, same ownership. And this is where it started. Now it's more than 200 acres. That is where you will find Laurel Hill West, and that is Laurel Hill East. Both sides of the Schuylkill River, one up in Ballackinwood and the other down in Philadelphia. So, There are 52 women in the book. I've divided into 5 sections: movers and shakers, artists and entertainers, scholars and educators, healers and givers, and then oddities. And I'm only going to talk about a few of them tonight. In fact, I'll probably only talk about 5 of them. But these are some of the women in the book that you need to be aware of. These are among the movers and shakers. You probably know about Sadie. Sadie is getting her own statue. Sadie will be the first African-American woman to have a public statue, a named African-American woman. They're African-American statues, but they're representative. She will be the first named African-American woman to have a statue in Philadelphia for the work that she did in the civil rights movement. Anna Jarvis, the founder of Mother's Day, is buried at Laurel Hill West. Then you've got Martha Kimball, who's the founder of Memorial Day, who's also buried at Laurel Hill West. And if you want to push it, we've also got Sarah Josepha Hale, who's responsible for the founding of Thanksgiving, and this woman, Elizabeth Duane Gillespie, who suggested Flag Day years before it became a holiday. But she's actually the one that put the bug in people's ears to have a Flag Day. So 4 holidays we have the women buried, and all of them were women who were the founders of these holidays. Who else are not going to talk about? Not going to talk about Hannah Clothier Hall. The middle name, her maiden name, Clothier, daughter of the merchant of Strawbridge and Clothier. She was a peace activist. She was a peace worker throughout the First World War, throughout the Great War. There's a peace section at Swarthmore College that is the work that she and her husband did for world peace. Very interesting family, the Clothier family. One of her brothers, Bill Clothier, is in the Tennis Hall of Fame. And her nephew, Bill Clothier Jr., was a tennis player who was also a spy for the CIA. He was probably the model for I Spy. Remember the TV show I Spy with the tennis player behind the Iron Curtain? That was Bill Clothier Jr. He was a CIA spy playing tennis behind the Iron Curtain. Anyway, that was Hannah's brother. Those are not the ones I'm going to offer you, though. These are the 2 I'm going to offer you a choice here. Frances Ann Wister was one of the 3 Wister sisters. She saved Old City, Philadelphia. Marion Stokes was a twice divorced communist who reported everything on the television for 30 years, and because nobody else was doing it. I'll give you a choice. Who you want to hear about, Frances Ann or Marion?
Okay, folks on Zoom, chime in.
Chime in.
Can we do both?
If we do both, it's cut off. I'll do both, but then I might have to cut something later. Depends on how late you want to stay. We'll do Frances Ann then. Frances Ann is one of what I call the 3 remarkable Wister sisters. The Wisters are an interesting family. They were the Woosters, W-U with an umlaut, S-T-E-R. And one of the Wooster brothers came to the United States and found out we don't use umlauts. So he became Wistar. The other brother came about 10 years later, found out we didn't use umlauts, and he became Wister. So 2 brothers who spell their last names differently, but all of the Wisters and the Wistars are from those original 2 that came. She was one of 3 amazing sisters. She's buried there, just off the path at Laurel Hill East. Imagine, if you will, Philadelphia without the Academy of Music, without the Philadelphia Orchestra, without Elfress Alley, and without those remarkable buildings on Germantown. She started the Philadelphia Orchestra, and she saved the others from destruction. She's the founder of Fellow Landmarks. This is the woman who saved all of those things that we just take for granted now as being part of old Philadelphia. She was named after her aunt, Fanny Kemble, the famous British actress, Frances Ann Kemble. I could drop something in here about Thomas Sully. Thomas Sully is buried at Laurel Hill East. After Charles Wilson Peale and Gilbert Stuart died, Thomas Sully became the portraitist of record for the next 30 or 40 years. He painted Thomas Jefferson like 7 times. He painted Fanny Kemble 11 times. He painted his wife 7 times. Let's hope his wife wasn't counting. We know that in retrospect. But that's who she was named after. Her sisters, Mary Channing Wister, Molly Wister, was married to Owen Wister, her cousin. She was the model for Molly in the Virginia. The novel, The Virginia, the first Western novel written by Owen Wister. Molly was based on his wife. Mary Channing Wister is the reason that there's music in the public schools today, and the reason that the Broad Street line is underground instead of a trolley above ground. She was responsible for both of those. The other sister, Ella Eustace Wister Haynes, became the spokesperson for PECO, back when it was Philadelphia Gas. Electric. Back when it was Philadelphia Electric, trying to convert people from gas to electric. She was the one who went out with the films and showed films about how electric was so much better than gas for household cooking and what have you. Now, this is Frances Anne. Frances Anne was upset that Boston had a symphony orchestra which they sent to Philadelphia 10 times a season and sold out all 10 concerts, just automatically. Even Chicago had a symphony orchestra, and Philadelphia had nothing. Well, Philadelphia had local orchestras, there's no doubt about that. It had some good orchestras. Henry Gordon Thunder was an organist and a choir director who probably had the best instrumentalists in town. He definitely had the best voices in town. When they put together the Philadelphia Orchestra, this was at a time when it was not proper to have an Irish orchestra conductor. An orchestra conductor should be German or Austrian. So Henry Gordon Thunder, who has one of the best names in music, the Irishman, did not get the job. Fritz Skeel got the job. Fritz Skeel was an Austrian. He did a magnificent job. He truly did, but he worked himself to death. He literally died as he was transcribing Beethoven's Ninth. He was buried with the score in his pocket and a baton in his hand. The second conductor of the orchestra was not worth mentioning, and I can't even think of his name. The third, of course, is the one that everybody loved, Stokowski. Stokowski and Frances Anne bumped heads from day one. They had 2 strong egos, and they just bounced off of each other. Stokowski, are you ready for this? Stokowski wanted to build a new place on the boulevard for the orchestra. And he said, go ahead and turn the Academy into a movie theater. Movies seem to be very popular now. So the Academy was going to be a movie theater. Frances said, no, you're out of order. You're out of order. The orchestra is staying. The orchestra, you are conducting the orchestra is mine. The orchestra stays at the Academy of Music is essentially what he told her, or what she told him. So it did. It stayed at the Academy, and Stokowski did great things with it. Then she got into the rehabilitation game, and she started an organization which it was Renovized Philadelphia, and then became Phila Landmark, and that's how you know it today, is Phila Landmark. That is her organization. She is the one who saved the Academy. She's the one who saved Elfreth's Alley. She saved Society Hill and even named it. She's the one who gave the name to Society Hill. Unfortunately, she didn't save a lot of Frank Furness's buildings, but that's a whole different issue. This is an amazing woman. She truly is. She saved the Powell House. The Powell House was literally within a week of being torn down and made into a parking lot for a taxi company next door. This is the home of the last colonial mayor of Philadelphia, who also was the first mayor of Philadelphia in the United States, Samuel Powell. And it's a beautiful home if you've been there. It's very well kept up. Almost got torn down. She saved it. She saved this building, the Franklin Institute building, which later became the City Museum. Lord knows what it's being used for now. It's still sitting there, I think, empty on 7th Street, but it's a beautiful building. I was in there when it was the Museum for the City, which has now moved on to Drexel. And that is Frances Anne. What else do I have to say about her? Oh, she was awarded the Gimbel Award, the highest award given to a woman in the city, the Gimbel Award. It went to women like Pearl Buck and Eleanor Roosevelt, and a couple of women in the book got the Gimbel Award. She was one of them. She is buried, she never married, she never had a partner that we can find. She's buried here. That's my car. The stones are facing away from the walk. And I don't know why, but this is the father, William Rochester. He was the founder of the Germantown Cricket Club. He was the father of the three remarkable Worcester sisters, with Frances Ann there. And then one son, there was a tag-along at the end, and that was John Caspar Worcester, who grew up to be a horticulturalist and a botanist, probably second only to Luther Burbank in the United States. After a few years at Tyler, he took over at the Scott Arboretum at Swarthmore, and he ran that for many, many years. And he was a very happy bachelor until he was in his 70s, and he met this very happy bachelor woman botanist, also in her 70s, and they decided they would like to be a couple. And in their 70s, they married, and then they lived like another 15 or 20 years together. It's really a sweet story. But that's John Caspar Worcester, the youngest son of the three Worcester sisters. All right, so you want to hear about Marion too. We will move on to Marion. Oh, and I forgot about this. This is her legacy now. This is her legacy, the Worcester String Quartet, which travels around. Yo-Yo Ma loves to play with the Worcester String Quartet. This is Marion Stokes. Marion is, let's see, what are her dates? 1929 to 2012. She went to girls' high school. She became an archivist out of high school. She went to the library, became an archivist. And that's what got her into this collecting mode, this idea that you had to save things. Left-wing politics, first marriage didn't last very long. She married a veteran from the Second World War. He is buried at Marion Station Cemetery, which is a small, mostly black cemetery in Ballakidwin, with a Star of David, which is really strange, because her second husband, Melvin Medlitz, was Jewish. No question about that, Melvin. The ironic thing is Melvin taught at Frederick Douglass High School. Melvin grew a beard. He was the only white teacher at the high school, and he was the one who looked most like Frederick Douglass. So whenever they did some sort of pageant, the white guy played Frederick Douglass because he's the one who resembled him the most. I thought that was funny. All right, this is Marion. Marion and Marion and Melvin were communists. They were literally card-carrying communists. They tried to defect to Cuba. They submitted their paperwork. They went to Mexico. They were waiting for the paperwork to come through. After a few months, it did not come through. She was a member of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. A lot of people were back then, including Lee Harvey Oswald, if you'll remember. A couple of people in here might remember that. The second marriage fell apart also when the chance to defect to Cuba fell through. She came back. She was disappointed, but this is at a time, you remember the vast wasteland of Sunday morning television, where all of the public service shows used to be shoveled. She got into public service television Sunday morning. What was the name of it? Input. Sunday morning TV show called Input. I don't know if it was before or after Larry Ferrari, but we got Larry Ferrari also, and I've done a podcast about him. But anyway, Marion was not afraid. I mean, she confronted anybody on this program. She would not take guff from anybody. And there was this white guy who was running the program, peace activist. His name was John Stockwell Stokes. His father was president of the Philadelphia Museum of Art. John Stockdale Stokes was so important that this is his mother's portrait. It was done by Diego Rivera. It's not on display. It's at PMA, but it's not on display. But yeah, that's who did the family portrait, was Diego Rivera. Stokes was married. He was a staunch Roman Catholic, and he was living in Chestnut Hill with his wife and 5 children. He fell madly in love with Marion. He divorced his wife, and he and Marion married in New Hope, and they moved to an apartment in the Barclay. And she got the archivist bug back. She became a huge fan. Well, first of all, it was the 1979 Iran hostage crisis. The news changed every day. First, it seemed like the CIA was involved, then the CIA wasn't involved. She had a hard time figuring out what was really going on. She said, I'm going to start taping this. So she got herself a Betamax, and she started to tape. Well, pretty soon, CNN started up, so she started to tape that. And then TBS started, and she started to tape that. Before you knew it, she had 7 machines running 24 hours a day, recording everything on television.
Why?
She did this for more than 20 years because she was an archivist, because she was a hoarder. The whole family setup was such that if they went out to dinner, they had to be back at such and such a time to change the tapes. She would get very upset if the tapes did not get changed on time. So they got these 7 tapes going. She developed a thing for Steve Jobs. She really liked him, probably because Steve Jobs, I didn't realize that he was adopted. He was apparently abandoned and adopted, which is what happened to Marion. She sort of identified with him that way. She started buying Apple at $7 a share.
Oh boy.
She told her friends to do the same, and those who followed her advice got very wealthy, including the Stockdale Stokes. They took her advice and they bought into Apple. She bought at least 2 of every Apple product ever made. The woman never sent an email in her life, and she had storage sheds full of Apple equipment that she was hoarding. She did this for more than 20 years. These 2 grew old together until they had 9 homes and apartments that were full of tapes. She subscribed to about 300 magazines a month. She would go to Barnes & Noble and drop $700 on books. And if somebody said, are you going to read all those? She said, you think because I'm black I can't read? I mean, she just gave it right back to him. Just gave it right back to him. They lived at the Barclay. They would sit in front of their television. They had 2 or 3 televisions, holding hands in their chairs and watching. And John died before Marion did. Marion died in 2012. The day that she died, her son went around and turned off all of the recording devices. It was the morning of the Sandy Hook massacre.
Wow.
By then, of course, nobody needed to archive. By then, everybody was doing their own archiving. But this woman saved thousands of hours of material that had not been archived by anyone else. And it's all now in the hands of archive.org. There were, what were the numbers on this? Let's see, there were 30 to 40,000 books, several years of magazines, 70,000 videotapes. If you watched them 8 hours a day, it would take you 342 years to watch all of the things that she recorded. And the weight was 31 tons. There is a documentary about her. It's called Recorder. Last time I checked, it was available, no charge. It was available for free in Vimeo. Absolutely fascinating movie, absolutely fascinating woman. She really was. Excuse me. She's buried at Laurel Hill West. So, that's Marion. You happy you heard about both of them? Mm-hmm. All right. I got some authors and entertainers here. Who do you recognize? You know Edie, yeah. You know, that wasn't her name, though. Her name was Eddie. Eddie Lou. She was named after her father. And she took the name Edie. John Facenda used to call her Edith. That was not her name. Her name was Eddie Lou. Cecilia Beau, the painter. How about Kitty Bowen, author? Cecilia Beau, probably the best woman painter, probably the best American woman painter ever. Say what you will about Mary Surratt, I think Cecilia Beau was a better painter. She had, Elizabeth Head Fetter, an author. She was a writer. She wanted to be a doctor, but she couldn't get through chemistry. So she became an author, and she wrote some incredible medical stuff. In 1945, she wrote an article in Collier's on masturbation. This is 2 years before the Kinsey Report. And she's got this full magazine article on masturbation. Very, very odd. Let's see, Gladys Hall Ball, one of my favorites. Gladys was one of the first gossip columnists in silent movies. She did an interview with Bela Lugosi it's just amazing, absolutely amazing. She's buried at an unmarked grave, unfortunately. Glenna, my discovery. I've got to admit, I developed crushes on some of these women. These two especially. Ernesta Drinker Bullet Bow Barlow. This is Cecilia Beau's niece. She painted her like 7 times. That's another niece here, Kitty Bowen. Catherine Drinker Bowen was the younger sister of Ernesta, and Cecilia said she was unpaintable. She said, with a forehead like that, she'll go to Bryn Mawr and write books. She literally said that. And she was right about the books, because she was Book of the Month Club 6 times. But let's see, where were we? Oh, Elizabeth Head Fetter. Oh, Glenna Colette Vere. 19 years old, she hit a golf ball. This is in 1907, 1908. She hit a golf ball 300 yards with a wooden shaft club. When she was in her 80s, she still had a handicap of 15, and she was out driving women a third her age. Just an amazing, amazing golfer. But these are what I'm going to offer you a choice on. Let's just do Henrietta. Let's do Anne. Let's do Anne. I'm going to skip Henrietta. Henrietta Cousins is essentially the mother, the wife for the Red Rose Girls. You know who the Red Rose Girls are? The 3 women illustrators. Elizabeth Shippen Green, Jessie Wilcox Smith, and Violet Oakley. The Red Rose Girls. They all trained under Howard Pyle. And then they were able to become successful artists because Henrietta Cousins took care of the house. She did the cooking, the cleaning, she walked the dogs, she worked the garden, she did everything. And that let 3 artists be artists. She was their wife. That's what an artist needs, right? An artist needs a wife. She was the wife for these 3 women. But I'll tell you about Aunt Francine instead. If I can. All right, there we go. Isn't she gorgeous? Just classic beauty. Classic beauty. Did you recognize her? She's a mainline debutante, born in 1917. Her grandfather was a Civil War general. And Francine sounds like a made-up name. Francine is a very common name. We have a lot of Francines buried at Laurel Hill East. And as I say, her grandfather was a general, General Francine in the Civil War. Anne is buried in the Errett family plot, or in the Errett mausoleum up here on Millionaires Row. This is heavy territory here. You know, this is the Widener Mausoleum. Up here you've got the George Childs Mausoleum. Elkins are across the street here, and there's Errett right there. And Anne Francine's ashes got snuck into her grandfather's mausoleum there. She was a society girl. She did not want to be a society girl. She wanted to be a cabaret singer. She wanted to be a performer. And much to the embarrassment of her mainline family, that is exactly what she decided to do. She had a very low voice. People called it a gypsy foghorn voice. One critic pointed out that her hair was so expressive. He said she could flip her hair and do more with her hair than most people could do with their whole bodies. She was about 5'10" and she always wore heels. She had this deep voice, intimidating as all get out, I imagine. Gorgeous with the long hair and everything. She was in Too Many Girls, and George Abbott, Lorenz Hart, and Richard Rodgers wrote a song for her. It's called You're Nearer. If you've heard Judy Garland at Carnegie Hall, Judy Garland does You're Nearer. You may have heard, you may know the song, but the song was written for Anne Francine. When the movie was made, it was sung by Lucy, well, it was sung by somebody else, but Lucille Ball played the role. Lucille Ball has a range of like 6 notes. So somebody else sang it in the movie. But it was actually written for Anne. Movies, she got into some movies. Believe it or not, she was in a Fellini movie. She was in Juliet of the Spirits. She plays the psychotherapist. But this is where she really shined. Broadway. When Mame opened on Broadway, Angela Lansbury and Beatrice Arthur were the lead roles. B. Arthur had other commitments. B. Arthur lasted, I think, 10 or 11 months, and they brought in Anne Francine. And Anne Francine took the role, and she seized it, and she held that role. And when Angela Lansbury went on, she stayed on. She was Vera Charles when Ann Miller played the role, and when Julia Prowse played the role. It was still Anne Francine playing Vera Charles. Here she is singing the song To the Man in the Moon is a Woman. The man in the moon is a lady. That's it. Terrific song. Television. Old timers like me know who those two people are. That is Barbara Eden and Lonesome George Gobel. Remember Lonesome George Gobel? They were in a show together called Harper Valley PTA. 1 season only. Anne Francine was the nosy next-door neighbor. She was the one who was always upset because Barbara Eden would run around in the skimpy little shorts. And anyway. She was in Crocodile Dundee. Have you seen Crocodile Dundee? Have you seen it lately? It is a disgusting movie, in retrospect. The scene, you will recall, Sue introduces Mick. They go to a party. She's standing in the corner, very tall, with that caftan on top of her head, very regal looking. Oh, Sue, darling, who's the young man? And Mick is looking at her, and he's listening to that voice. And he walks up, and he grabs her. I think he actually did grab her, because look at the eyes in the guy. Do you remember what she said? Sue excuses this by saying, he's from Australia. Her response is, well, I must go there sometime. Anne Francine had a marvelous career. She was not in the Sutton Foster Anything Goes. She was in the Patti LuPone Anything Goes as Mrs. Harcourt. So she had a terrific career on Broadway. She had a terrific career in movies. Here's some of her movies. Here's some of the television shows that she did. And then she went into teaching, and she had a stroke, and she became aphasic. And they gave her a grease board, and she kept teaching. Right. She could still teach, even though she couldn't speak anymore. She died 1999, like the day after rats. A woman who's almost exactly, makes me think of her, the same type. Come on, Joe. Blazing Saddles, the woman. I'm not blanking. Anyway, they died like within 48 hours of each other, and they were very similar in their personalities. You will notice, after she would instruct students by pantomiming her commands, writing them. No immediate relatives survive. We think she was gay. She left most of her belongings to a lesbian support group. We can find no partner. We find no record of her ever having a partner, this gorgeous woman, successful woman.
Madeline Kahn, you're thinking of?
Madeline Kahn, thank you. Yes, Madeline Kahn and Anne Francine. You see what I mean, though? The same sort of over-the-top personality. And they died within a couple of days of each other. And that is where she's buried, in the Eret Mausoleum. All right, any questions? Anything coming up there?
Have not heard anything. Nope.
All right. We doing okay on time?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right, scholars. See anybody familiar? The ones that I recommend you know, Rachel Lloyd is interesting because she was the first American woman to get a PhD in chemistry. And what she did with this is very interesting. She's a Quaker woman. Do you realize how labor-intensive cane sugar is? When an enslaved person was sold downriver, that meant they were usually going from a cotton plantation to a sugar plantation, and the lifespan was about 3 years once you got to a sugar plantation. You would work yourself to death in about 3 years. Sugar beets, on the other hand, did not require enslaved labor. She went out to Kansas, I forget where, but set up in the chemistry department there, and they established the sugar beet industry in the United States. And today, more than half of the sugar that you eat is not from sugar cane. It's from beets. It's from sugar beets. And it's because of the work that she did back in Kansas in the 1870s. Kansas or Nebraska, I forget which. This woman is just sad. This is probably one of the most brilliant minds in psychology who ever lived. John Dewey was her faculty advisor. John Dewey said her PhD thesis was better than his.
Dewey Decimal, you mean that Dewey?
No.
No, that's not Dewey.
Different Dewey. Dewey, the psychologist, the founder of behavioral psychology. Anyway, she got caught up. She married, and then she followed her husband's career, and it destroyed her career. And she ended up not accomplishing what she could have accomplished with her brilliant mind. She actually had a psychiatric breakdown at the end, and her ashes are scattered. She doesn't even have a final resting place. Another one like that is Irina Koprovska. Hillary Koprovsky was one of the, an early virologist. He came up with the first polio vaccine, live polio vaccine. It had some defects in it. It was not the same as a Salk and Sabin. But she worked with Papanicolaou and helped develop the pap smear. And then she became a photomicrobiologist at Temple, and but she had to follow him wherever his career took him, because he came to the Wistar Institute to work at the virology lab. So she just came along, and she finally got in charge of the microbiology at Temple. But it was just, she had to follow her husband. It's just a shame. All right, scholars and educators. Catherine McBride was the president of Bryn Mawr. I'll tell you about Catherine. I like Catherine. She was born 1904. She graduated from Bryn Mawr. Her PhD thesis was in neuropsychology. She's buried at Laurel Hill West, up by the funeral home. There's the funeral home there. She went to the Stevens School, Ravenswood, the same school that Grace Kelly and those kids went to. Now part of the, I've lost track, let's see, it became part of the textile campus and then the PU campus and now the Jefferson campus, but the Ravenswood building is still there. It's just gone through many, many changes. And this was her PhD thesis. Now imagine, if you will, doing a PhD thesis on aphasia in the years before advanced imaging is available. In other words, you can't do a CT scan or an MRI to see where the structural damage is. You have to wait until the patient dies, and then if you're lucky, you can get an autopsy. She and Dr. Weisenberg found every aphasic patient in Philadelphia and followed them for several years. And they did get autopsies on some. But this was an absolutely brilliant PhD thesis. It really did change the way that people looked at aphasia. She was hired away to Mount Holyoke? It probably says so here. But anyway, she was hired back. And you look at the date on this. December 3rd, 1941, 4 days before Pearl Harbor. Look how young she is. People at Bryn Mawr were ecstatic that Catherine was coming back, that Catherine was going to be their president. Catherine knew everybody. Catherine talked to everybody. And she was Catherine to everybody. She was not Dr. McBride. She knew all the gardeners, she knew all of the staff, the librarians. It was just an amazing place when she was there. She was a progressive in politics. She hired Herb Apthaker at Bryn Mawr. She hired a communist to teach at Bryn Mawr. Now what that reminds me of, I don't remember who it was. That's the president of the University of Chicago. Somebody said, "Are you still teaching communism at the university?" He said, "Yes, in cancer at the medical school." And that's the way she thought of it. If you're going to learn about, if you're going to have to fight something, you got to know about it. And if you're going to learn about communism, hire a communist to do the teaching. And that's exactly what she did. During the Red Scare in the 50s, when the government, of course, nothing like this would ever happen today, but when the government threatened to withhold scholarships from people who were protesting, she just withdrew the school from the scholarship. She said, "We'll get our money someplace else." Same thing happened in Vietnam. Same thing. Nixon's, they started to come after the protesters on campus. She says, "No, no thank you." And all of the Quaker schools did this. It wasn't just Bryn Mawr. Swarthmore and Haverford did the same thing. The other Quaker schools did the same thing. Technically Bryn Mawr is not a Quaker school, but yes, Bryn Mawr is a Quaker school. Swarthmore is a Quaker school. Haverford is a Quaker school. So is Bryn Mawr. So is Bryn Mawr. She retired after 30 years. She had 23 honorary degrees when she retired. The campus doubled in physical size. It quintupled graduate students in the time that she was there. Nowadays, when you go to visit the campus, you go through the McBride Gate here. There's a poem about McBride here at the gate that was written by one of her classmates, Marianne Moore. Oh no, not same class. Marianne Moore's class in 1909. Again, no record of a partner, no record of her living with anybody. She's buried with her parents at Laurel Hill West. Her legacy is the McBride Scholars. Any Bryn Mawr student over 24 or 25, I think, gets extra help with through the McBride Scholarship Program. All right, 7:15, and I'll do one of these. Annie Inglis was 19 years old when she died. She had rheumatic fever. She knew she was dying. She was confined to a wheelchair. She gave her mother her prized possession, which is a $1 gold coin, and said, "Use this to build a home for people like me." And her mother did it. Her mother actually built it was called the Home for Incurables, which a little bit of a marketing problem with the Home for Incurables, but Eventually, it became Inglis House, and it was named after Annie and her $1 gold coin. That's as opposed to, well, I told you about Irina Kaprowska. She was co-inventor of the pap smear with Dr. Papanicolaou. Anna McGee, one of 7 siblings who grew up together. They all lived in the same house their entire life. None of them ever married. They had separate rooms. They had separate servants. And as each of them died, they left to the next one down, to the rest of them down. Anna was the last survivor. And she took the money and put it into an account and said to the city, when there's enough money, build a rehabilitation hospital. And after about 20 years, there was about $6 million, and they built the McGee Rehabilitation Hospital.
Was that also McGee Women's Hospital in Pittsburgh, or is that a separate McGee?
That's a different one. That's a different one.
Because I'm from Pittsburgh, and
Ah,
that's
okay.
a very familiar name.
Oh, I don't know that one. I don't know that one. But I was an ER doc in Philadelphia for
And in Vietnam,
30,
too?
for 30,
Were you,
well, no, I was a medic in Vietnam.
Medic, yeah.
Yeah. Well, 91 Charlie. Assistant battalion surgeon was I was in the field, but it was at a base camp in the field with the battalion aid station. Anyway, where are we going with that?
McGee. They built this hospital.
Rehabilitation center.
Oh, yeah, McGee Rehab. The thing that I find interesting there is the fact that these 7 siblings lived together their entire life and never married. Just one of those little oddities. Who can I offer you here? Let's do Anna Lukens. Anna was a Quaker. She was one of the early graduates of Female Medical College. Now, Female Medical College was the original name when it was founded in 1850. Sarah Josepha Hale, the editor of Godey's Ladies Book, Ladies Home Journal, was Louisa Knapp Curtis. She's buried in another part of the cemetery. But Sarah Josepha Hale didn't like that female appellation. She didn't like Vassar Female College either. So she fought against that, and Vassar dropped the female, and then a year or two later, Female Medical College became Women's Medical College, and it stayed that way up until 1970. Here's a good trivia question for you. Last medical school to go co-ed in the United States. Last medical school to take women was Jefferson. The last one to go co-ed was Women's Medical College. It took men in 1970. Anyway, Anna was among the class, and they had a hard time getting clinical samples. They could do the work in the classroom, of course, but they didn't have patients. So the leaders of the women's medical went to the leaders of, at that time there were several medical schools in town, but everybody met on Saturday at Pennsylvania Hospital. And then doctors would bring patients in and demonstrate. It's a terrific way to learn, it really is. They don't do enough of that anymore. Well, the women decided that they were going to go, and the women who ran the medical school talked with the men. They agreed this would happen, so the women bought their tickets to go to the lectures. They show up, and the guy taking the tickets looks at them. You got to go around back. So, you know, this is in the 1860s. Imagine how they're dressed. With the long, send them to the back so they got to climb up the steps in the auditorium to get to their spaces. And the men see that they're there. Well, the men knew they were coming because word had gone out, a note had gone out earlier that said, be sure to show up Saturday for the she-doctors. So they were there ready for the she-doctors. And there was a lot of mumbling and tension is the best way to say it. Well, so Dr. DaCosta gets up and he demonstrates one of his patients with tuberculosis, Another doctor demonstrates somebody with some sort of an ear problem. And then the orthopod has a patient with a poorly healing proximal femur fracture. So he has this poor guy up there, and he's draped. But unfortunately, as they're moving him around, the drape slipped and he exposed himself. The men in the audience went crazy. They're the ones who started whooping and hollering because women were not supposed to see this. A real woman would not put herself in a position where she would even expect to see something like this. So they just started whooping and hollering. They literally started throwing spitballs at these women. Things settled down a little bit, but as the women were leaving the hospital, they were literally pelted by spitballs and just hollering from the male medical students. National news. This was called the She-Doctor Panic of 1859. It actually made national news. If there had been television back then, it would have definitely been on television. New York actually sounded a little jealous. They didn't think anything so exciting could happen in such a backwater city as Philadelphia. But this was a big deal. And it became legendary. If you talk to graduates of Women's Medical College, they all have a version of this story about how the women had to fight their way through the men just to learn how to practice medicine. It's a terrific story also. But Anna Lukens was one of those women. This was the original Women's Medical College. Just to give you an idea. The whole story of Women's Medical College, I did a whole podcast about them, which is what I talked about Anna. I forgot to show the slides as I was going through, sorry. She has a very simple stone. She's a Quaker, so a very simple stone. That's about what you'd expect. And it is 7:24. Oddities.
What about the Shipley sisters? You missed them, huh?
I did. Well, I didn't.
Was that the
There's
Shipleys
not a
from
lot.
the
There's not a lot to
1700s?
tell about them. What's that?
Shipleys from the 1700s?
No. The Shipley sisters are the three sisters who started the school out on in Bryn Mawr. It was a feeder. It's a feeder school. There are two big feeder schools. Well, actually, there's three: Agnes Irwin, Baldwin, and Shipley. The Shipley sisters were three college grads, none of whom married. One of whom did have a partner, a female partner, but they just dedicated their lives to educating high school girls and making them ready for Bryn Mawr. Bryn Mawr was hard to get into. You had oral exams in 3 different languages as entrance exams to get into Bryn Mawr. They made it tough. They wanted to make it as tough as any of the boys' schools. Anyway, what I can offer you here, let's see, we're not going to talk about May. May was a dear 19-year-old Christian girl in 1900 who would, on Sundays would go to Chinatown and she would teach English and Bible studies to Chinese immigrants, except she developed a heroin habit and she died of an overdose.
Oh.
She's in the book. You can read about it. Who just popped up there? Henrietta Garrett. Henrietta Garrett is, the lesson there is please make sure you have a will. Henrietta Garrett died with a massive fortune in the middle of the Great Depression, and it took more than 20 years to get it sorted out, and about 40,000 people made a claim on the inheritance. It was madcap, just total madness, total madness. And also, her maiden name was Schaefer. I've learned that there are at least 7 different ways to spell Schaefer in trying to do research on her. So let's see. You want the princess or you want the woman who started her own religion?
Princess.
Princess. Princess Olga. Princess Olga. I will warn you, Princess Olga is not buried at Laurel Hill, but her story is so good. And she has a stone there. This is Olga Demidov Tremetskoy Stover, from not one, but 2 Russian royal families, the Demidovs and the Tremetskoys. The Tremetskoy marriage did not last long. It's unclear what happened to her first husband. It's possible he was killed in the war, but Olga was off doing other things by then. She put herself in a position in Paris where gentlemen of great wealth could come and hire companionship for a week or two at a time. And so she became a courtesan, she became a hired companion, which lasted fine until the Hollywood producers said, I did not give you that $50,000 worth of jewelry, give it back. She said that was a gift. So there was the argument over the $50,000 in jewelry. There was the time when she was in a hotel room. She got into an argument with a guy, and she threw a wine bottle at him. It went through the window and knocked out somebody who was walking by on the sidewalk. But when the case came to court, the guy who'd been knocked out didn't see who threw the bottle, so he couldn't identify her, and the case was dismissed. And as Olga was leaving the court, she turned around, she lifted the veil on her cap, and thumbed her nose at the judge and turned and walked out. This was another time she was found in a kind of unusual situation with, there was a general and a diplomat in this hotel room with Olga and 4 chorus girls for some reason. Well, when the police showed up, 2 of the chorus girls split, and Olga explained, there's nothing to see here. We were spies together in the Great War. We're just getting over some champagne and discussing our gay reunion of World War spies back when we were spying together. This is my favorite. This is my favorite. She's explaining, she managed to talk her way out of jail every time. She was never in jail, despite all of this tomfoolery. But I'll let you read this whole thing. She brought her mother over from Paris, and she says, couldn't get enough milk for her cat. If you were writing the headline for this story, what would you write?
Oh, no.
Olga is not buried at Laurel Hill. Olga's second husband was an archaeologist from Penn, Edward Royal Stover. He loved her. Look, married Olga Demidov, Princess Serge Streletsky, who hopes to lie here someday. Didn't work out that way. It's entirely possible that Olga never set foot in Philadelphia in her life, but this is where her stone is, and she's got such great stories. Her grandson, named, believe it or not, Sergei Trubetskoy, he is a tour guide in Williamsburg, Virginia. I've been in touch with him. He said he visited his grandmother once. She was living on an island off of Spain, and that's where she died, and that's where she is buried. So that is Princess Olga Demidov Stover. One of my favorite quotes. The moment we have reason to think we are beginning fiction instead of fact, be the fiction ever so brilliant, our interest collapses like a pricked balloon. I just love the stories. You know the major difference between fiction and nonfiction? Fiction has to make sense. Fiction has to make sense. So I've given you a good healthy look at a few of the people that are in the book. Happy to answer any questions. If there's anything in particular that, if you picked it up and you saw something that caught your eye, but there's 52 stories like this in the book.
How can people on Zoom and watching the video get the book?
Funny you should ask. Okay. Actually, they can get it from Amazon. I would prefer you go to the Laurel Hill site, Laurel Hill PHL, and find the gift shop. And that way the money goes straight to them. What I did, instead of leaving Laurel Hill something in my will, I wrote this book, and they have all the rights to it. They get all the money from it. And I've got enough material for at least 3 more books. But I'd like to see a little more action on this one before I put the time in on the next ones. So you can order it from Laurel Hill, you can order it from Amazon, or you can email me. That's my email address, and I will send you a copy. I'll send you an autographed copy if you want to email me directly.
Any questions from anyone on Zoom or in the room?
I have one.
Yes, yes.
How did you come up with your title? It
All
reminds
Bones
me of-
Considered.
It reminds me of All Things Considered.
Yeah, and that was the idea. And when I was thinking about doing a podcast, I was trying to come up with a good name. And I put it out to a group on Facebook, and I don't remember who gave me the idea. It was either Terry Mulligan or Mary Siegel. I'll have to ask them one of these days. But one of them gave me that idea. I said, that's it. And it just seemed to stick. And PBS, or NPR does know. They've left me alone. They don't care.
There's a question from someone on Zoom. Does it seem a majority of the famous folks never married, and do you think that fact contributed to their success?
Half of these women never married, and yes, of course it contributed to their success. Because to be successful, you need a wife. And some of these women knew that. I mean, that's the Red Rose Girls, I think, is just such a perfect example of that. These 3 women, professional artists, who knew what they wanted and how to get it. And what they had to do was they had to have a wife. So they just hired this other woman to do all of the housekeeping, and that left them to be artists. And they became very successful artists. The examples, like Helen Woolley and Irina Koprovska, could have had much bigger careers, but they had to follow they didn't have to, but they did. They followed their husbands' careers, and it chopped their careers off short. I think they could have done so much more than they did. The women who did not marry are just, you don't miss them not having a male companion. Even the ones who did marry, somebody like Elizabeth Duane Gillespie, I think the only reason she married was so she could have a daughter. And I'm not even sure that she and her husband ever lived together. She never got a divorce. She lived with that. She was Benjamin Franklin's great-granddaughter. She married this military guy named Gillespie, and they had a daughter. But he died out in California. He's buried out there someplace. She's buried in the Duane plot at Laurel Hill East in an unmarked grave. Yet this is the woman who put together the sanitary fair. She's the woman who saved the Centennial in 1876. Just an amazing woman. And she was essentially single. It's like Frances Ann Worcester. Could Frances Ann Worcester have done everything she did if she were raising... Mary Channing Worcester is an exception to the rule. She had 5 kids, and yet by the time she was 27, she was sitting on the board of the Board of Education. She's the one who worked to get music in the school. She's the one who worked to get the subway underground, or the travel underground on Broad Street. And then she died giving birth to the 5th child in her 30s. But she accomplished so much. She has a school named for her. Their most famous graduate, of course, is Bill Cosby. He went to Mary Channing Worcester School.
Another question on
Yes.
Zoom. Who's your favorite?
Who's my favorite? Ooh, that's a toughie. I'm going to toss it up between Amy Ernesta Drinker Bullet Bowl Barlow, who her Aunt Cecilia painted 7 times. By the way, her nickname was Commando Mary. She had a radio show during World War II to encourage women to get involved in the war effort. And as a joke, they named her this very proper Philadelphian with a mixed mainline Boston accent. And she was called Commando Mary. And the other is Glenna Collett-Vere. Part of that is because I discovered Glenna. Nobody knew she was there. And I discovered this world-class golfer in an unmarked grave. Well, I shouldn't say unmarked. She married into the Vare family. If you know Philadelphia politics, the Vare brothers were the princes of South Philadelphia. They ran South Philadelphia. That's why the Cessna was such a mess, is because of the Vare brothers. But the Vare brothers, one of the sons married Glenna Collette. And Glenna Collette is buried in the Vare plot. So her name is not on the stone. But I know she's right behind the Ludens plot, the guy who invented the menthol cough drop. It's like the Shipley sisters. The Shipley sisters are buried very, very close. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, here's some of Shipley graduates. Superman, the new Superman went to Shipley. Happy Rockefeller, Shipley grad. There we go. This is the Shipley stone. I expect to, every time I go, I expect to see gum here. You know why? Because look who's buried right there. Frank Fleer, the guy who invented bubble gum.
Oh my gosh.
This stone is usually immaculate. Once a year, I think the Shipley girls come out and clean it themselves. It's like the Girard College plot. We have the Girard College plot, and once a year, Girard comes out and cleans it. It's just immaculate. And I think the same thing happens with the Shipleys.
All right, any final questions?
Yes?
Okay, seeing none. Thank you so much, Joe. Oh,
sorry.
okay, one more.
I went to this Hollywood cemetery in Richmond, Virginia. It was the most fascinating place.
Yes?
After Gettysburg, there were all kinds of Southerners that were dead, and the North didn't want them in Gettysburg. They didn't want to bury them there, so they shipped them all down on wagons, all these bodies,
Right.
down to Richmond.
Right.
And there's this huge triangle, big, huge
Oh, yeah.
pyramid-shaped thing.
Yeah.
And they let this man out of jail because he was a really good bricklayer, and he made this like perfectly designed. That tour was the most amazing thing, and I was
That
fascinated.
cemetery was designed by John Notman, the same man who designed Laurel Hill East.
The Hollywood.
Laurel Hill East was his first gig when he came over from Scotland, and it impressed enough people that when Hollywood Cemetery was built, they hired John Notman as their architect.
And I thought it was the one, somebody told me that in Richmond, there's a cemetery where all these ladies of the night, they were not allowed to have bank accounts, and they were a lot of black women that were so super wealthy, but they didn't have anything to do with their money, so they spent it all on their gravestones. And that's the grave I wanted to see. I wanted to go there, but I don't think it was the Hollywood Cemetery.
No,
I
that
still
sounds
have
more
to
like
find that.
no, that sounds more like New Orleans. But
I-
they said it was in
It
Richmond.
was somewhere in Richmond.
I'll be darned.
Can we buy your book? That's what I really want to know.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
You have signed
Even
copy?
autograph it.
Yeah.
35 bucks. I'll take cash. I will take. I'll take Venmo. I'll take PayPal. I'll even take a credit card.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, you're very